Hello, everyone, and welcome to Paranormal Roundtable. That's PRT. My name is Josh Turner. My friends call me Wolf. And I'm with my co-host, Tony, and he is called...
Mushu.
And
that's what I'm known as on these streets.
Wow. Okay. And so we have a show tonight, but first we're going to get to the prtpodcast.com, prtpodcast.com. That's where you can find our website. At our website, you can find artwork. You can find all of our old
shows,
episodes. And you can look at in the archives and go back and watch all the great, or listen to all the great episodes. Right now, though, we wanted to tell you that we're changing the email. You can still use the old email, but it's Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com. Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com. That's going to be the email address. That's going to be the one that we're going to be using. But I will still be having things forwarded from the old email address, which was doswolfman88 at gmail.com. You can still use that to get in touch with me. I'll still be checking that too. But we're moving it over to the Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com. Much easier to remember. It's got my name in there. And the other thing I was going to talk to you guys about is joining our groups, Paranormal Roundtable group on Facebook, Paranormal Encounters, which is Tony's, which has been growing, and Paranormal Lounge, which is Nellie's, which has also been growing. I think you guys y'all are almost dead even right now. So anyways, that being said, join those groups. We also do Lori Shivers, Cryptids, and Paranormal Reality. So get on there and get in those groups and conversate with us, and you'll have some fun, hopefully, in the groups. If not, well, you're probably a boring person and we don't need you anyway. But so that being said, we're going to talk today about some interesting stuff. We're going to the land of the rising sun.
China.
Japan.
Oh, okay. Well, technically, at one point, they were the same, right? Didn't they occupy China?
Actually, yeah. Well, no, actually, yes and no. China, that actually was Chinese from the mainland of China that actually settled in Japan years and years and years ago. And surprising that you're Asian and you did not know that Japan was the land of the rising sun. I know you've studied it too.
Obviously, I'm joking. I mean, I know a lot about Japan.
Yeah, I know you do. That's why I was kind of like, I just your humor was so dry. It was like eating a very, very dry cracker with no water. So I was just like, wow, you did a very good job on that one. Because I was like, what? Like, you didn't know? I thought you would have, because you knew we were doing Japan.
Yeah, so I should have just let it slide by there, didn't it? Really? Instead of really calling back to it.
I didn't want the people at home to think I had an ignorant co-host that didn't know.
They already know that.
Okay. They want you to think, man, this guy is dumb. He's dumb, man. No,
I'm an expert in everything in my own sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me be ignorant in what I want to be ignorant on.
Okay. I guess the people at home will have to let you do that.
Yeah.
So, and believe it or not, folks, Mushu has fans. It's hard to wrap my mind around, but yeah, some things happen. Unfortunate things happen.
All of you out there, I appreciate it. I don't really understand it either, but yeah, thanks.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, as we were saying, we're going to Japan to discuss some yokai.
Yokai, yep.
Yeah, some Japanese demons, some different types.
Well, and you at home can make up your minds whether they're demons or...
Oh, I mean, yokai actually means like it's a couple different things, but I think the kanji comes together to form like bewitching or mysterious, or so it's either, it could be something that just, a creature that tricks you or something like that. But either way, it's just a supernatural entity that has, that is just based around Japan, and they have a lot of stories about them. So,
and the origin of that word is actually Chinese.
Really?
Yeah, it came over from mainland China. Yeah, and I believe that some of the first inhabitants, when that were in Japan, there was an indigenous people who were actually Caucasoid, like Caucasian, and they lived in the north, and they were white, and the original Japanese inhabitants were from mainland China, and of course they interbred with those Caucasian looking, and there's still a people. I forgot what they're called. They're a minority now, but they're like white with red hair. It's very weird. And they live in the north. And you didn't know Koji, but you knew Tak, right?
Mm.
So and Koji is very light skinned, and he has reddish brown hair, which is weird. It's like but anyway, that's a friend of mine, folks, and we're going to refer back to him because he gave me some of these stories, and then he hooked me up with another friend of his who told me some stories, and I recently got in touch with him, and I put it on a group and asked if anybody had any stories, and I got one really cool one that came out of there. So I've been putting together this show about the Japanese ghosts, demons, whatever you want to call them, and the supernatural. And there's some pretty cool stuff. Japan has its own myths and legends. I also got one from a Japanese masseuse. She told me a story that was pretty it was pretty crazy. So, and
okay, but more importantly, how was the massage?
She's very good.
Okay.
She does like this stabbing motion, boom, 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 and it gets the knots out. Now, if you want somebody really deep tissue, there's a guy I use that goes really deep on your back or whatever. And when she first started doing that, I was like, this woman is just poking me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. She's literally just taking two fingers to poke on my back. And I thought, oh, okay. And then she would kind of rub it in one spot and hold it down. And then I was like, okay. So then the next day, my wife was like, it was good. She was like, how's your back? I said, it's great. But she did what she did was just stab the pressure points, you know, she was doing some kind of whatever, you know, the Japanese mysticism and then, and whatever kind of magic she did. And then
spiritual attacks that we use. Yeah, of course.
Spiritual attacks. So a few days later, I said, my back's still stiff though in certain spots, but those main points, you know, were done. So I went to the other guy. And he
Wait, when you mean other guy, which guy? Because, you know, we both know you have a guy that works on horses that also works on you. So
you're talking about my chiropractor.
Yeah. Okay. So is that deep tissue?
No, this guy is very strong. He's very strong. In fact, I think Anthony's used him before too. And he gets in there and he gets after it. So they've kind of become a 1-2 punch for me. Like she'll do the hit the points, and then he'll do the overall like deep tissue of the muscle. It's pretty cool. So I finally found, I got a guy that cuts my hair. I got a guy that works on my car. I got a guy that'll, you got to have those things in life. You got to have a good massage. You got to be able to you got to have a chiropractor.
In a doomsday scenario, those are the people you want to bring anyway.
Sure.
Yeah.
Have them in there.
You could definitely use that.
You'd probably want a bronze age type. You want somebody like a blacksmith. You'd have to have that if the world went to crap.
I think you'd have to be before pre-blacksmith.
A saddlery because you need horses.
You know? Anyway, let's continue.
So anyways, I got some stories here, and you're talking. The yokai is kind of a term that's kind of a catch-all, you know, for demons, Japanese demons. There's also the obake and the bakemono. Okay. Now, you're going to remember those because those are shape-shifting demons, all right? And then there's a bakaniko, which is a cat shape-shifting demon. Now, in Japanese tradition, when someone dies, their soul, or the reikan, can become a yūrei. And a yūrei is, or yūrei, however you want to pronounce it, they are a type of ghost. It's like almost like a catch-all for ghosts, but they're a little more... They have a certain time that they go out and they haunt and they do what they do. Now, each of these stories you're going to get is going to be, it could be a variant of one of these types of things, you know. I'll start with one. This was a pretty crazy story.
Well, real quick, way before we even start, I just want to mention real quick that we're obviously not Japanese, even though I am Asian. So if we do mispronounce some of the words, please don't be too harsh on us. I mean, we're not fluent in Japanese, so we did look it up, and we're trying our best to pronounce it as best as we can. But
yeah, because the stories,
forgive us.
Yeah, except for a couple of the stories, the demons and the names of them, you know, I had to read them, and a couple of the stories I got were only written, you know, and I had to look up what the names and terms meant because they were not spoken to me. Now, the Kitsune, I can tell you what that is. I mean, like that was pronounced to me by, you know, somebody. So, you know, and then of course, you know, there's the different like the yokai and all that. So those were spoken about by these people. Now I'll give you some backstory on my friend Koji, and he is okay with that. I've talked to him; he's okay with it. He doesn't have a problem with it. He was a gangster, like a real gangster, and that's how I met him back in the day. He used to come downtown. He's friends with, I'm pretty sure, your stepdad, Tony. D knows him. Scorpion, Squid. We all know the guy. My deceased friend Willie. We were all buddies. We were all friends back in the day. And Koji was, he liked to be involved in gambling and some other things. And he was covered completely in tattoos. And he worked for a group of guys from the Pacific Rim that were part of a organized group of people.
They were fighting dinosaurs?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so I don't want to get too far. Koji's not his real name. That's what they call him. That's not his real name. So I'll just be honest with you. He was basically an Yakuza. So if anybody knows what that is. So we got together one night, me, and then there was another guy that was a friend of ours with him. And he had a nickname, and I can't remember what it was. We called him Ronin. But, and this is, we know two different guys named Ronin, which is funny. Ronin means like a masterless samurai, if anybody knows. So this guy, Ronin, was actually Japanese, and he hung out with a friend of mine from Korea who was really good friends with my brother, and that's how I met these guys. And back in the day, we had similar interests, so I'm not going to get into what those were. But we worked with the guys a little bit, having fun, hanging out, whatever, and they hung out at the club, and sometimes they would, help us throw people out, whatever. And, when you hang out with people, you get to know them. And I got to know one of their cousins who made swords, or traditional swords or whatever. And he gave me a crazy story, and I actually don't remember his name, but we will talk about these stories. And I almost had Scorp and D or one of them come on the show so they could talk about some of these stories too, because they had a couple they were going to tell me that I might have forgotten about. But anyways, it is what it is. One of the stories that I was given by them, these two guys, was of when Koji was a kid. When he was a child, he lived in Kyoto, and he told me a crazy story. He said that he lived in a house that was haunted. It was a very old house, and the guy that lived in the house before him was known as a miserly, angry, cantankerous guy, And he lived alone for years. His wife had died when he was in his early or 40s or something like that, and then he lived to be like 70 or something. So. The guy lived for 30 years by himself. And as far as anybody knew, he only had like cats as his companions or whatever. But Koji told me a story. He said that when he was about 7, 8 years old, he was like brushing his teeth, whatever, looking in the mirror. And he sees this man just walk behind him, in the mirror, like in the hallway, just like, in the horror movies, they just walk right behind you. And he was like, he just walked right behind me. And I turned around and I was like, what is that? So he lived alone with his mom. Koji's father had died when he was young. And so he did not really have a dad. So he was like, what was that? So he goes and looks down the hallway both ways, doesn't see anything. And so he just kind of like plays it off, like, okay, I'm just going to pretend like I didn't see it. Well, this was the first week they had moved in. And it was like a small, wasn't a real big place. And so one day he was sitting there and he was playing video games, Nintendo, because it's big over there at that time when he was a kid. And he's about my age. So he was playing Nintendo, and and then he said that the game started moving on its own. The game started like doing whatever it was doing, like on its own. Like he could not control it. And it was just like somebody was playing it, but it was like it wasn't him. So he just put the controller down and watched as this whatever was controlling it, and it did all the levels perfectly and exactly the way they were supposed to be done. And I don't remember what game he said it was. It was a Japanese game that I had never heard of over here, and he pronounced it, And it was like a platformer game, if anybody knows what that is, where you just scroll along and you jump up and down and all that. And it completed all the levels, and it just kept going. It kept going to the point where he was like, because he was having a hard time. He couldn't beat the game or whatever. He couldn't advance. So he was sitting there watching it going like, this thing is just like playing. So he just was like kind of scared, but then he was also curious. So he thought maybe this must be a glitch, with the game. His first thought wasn't like, oh no,
Oh, demons.
yeah, it's a yūrei here to kill me. It's a, ghost or whatever. No, he just thought there's something wrong with it. It's glitching, And he said that it started going through all the levels and he was fascinated. So he sat there and he watched it happen until the very end. And then he read the credits and all that and was like, wow, this is crazy. Well, after that happened, he turned around and he saw this man walking down the hallway and had like long hair, but it was kind of put up in a ponytail, but it was like gray hair, and he said he knew it was a man. It wasn't a woman. He didn't see the front of this person yet, but he could tell it was a man. But he had a man with longer hair. He recognized that. And he said it looked like an old man with like, you're balding at the top, but you got hair in the back or whatever. And his hair was long. And he said that he saw it, just like walking away, and he thought, whoa, there's that weird man again. So he jumped up, and he when he went to try to say something, it was gone. Like the image of the man was gone. And then finally one night he was asleep in his bed, and they had this sliding closet door, and the sliding closet door slowly opened. Like he was sitting there just looking at the closet door, and it had like a mirror on it, And he said that it just slowly started opening, and he could see fingers, and he said they were like gray looking. Whenever he would see this man, it was like his skin was gray. And he said that it started to slowly open the closet door, and he sees the hand there and sees the fingers, and he's like, what is that? Like, And so as the door got about halfway open, he knew that that's what it was. It had to be that same old man or whatever. And he said that he peeked his head out from the closet, and he saw his face full on at that time. And he was like, he had an angry look on his face. But for whatever reason, he said it really didn't scare him. He was like, I wasn't terrified. Like I didn't look at him and go, oh my gosh, I'm going to pee the bed. Those were his exact words. And he said, I just looked at it and thought, oh no, why is this man in my closet? And then he said, but what scared him was when it was stepped out, like he couldn't see the legs. Like there was no legs. It was just the upper body. And then he thought, this is not a man. This is a ghost, And he said that the guy looked old and feeble. So he was like, what's he going to do? I mean, he's like, it's an old man, But then when he saw that it was a yūrei, it scared him. So he like threw the sheets up and rolled, on the other side of the bed. And he said when he looked up, it was right there. And he said you could kind of see the upper legs, but then there was no lower legs. And he said he was just screaming, bloody murder. So then his mom comes in the room and is like, what's wrong with you? So then his mom, the thing disappears. He tries to tell his mom about it. And she's like, okay, bull crap, whatever the Japanese word is for that. And she told him to go back to bed and no more video games, because obviously playing video games is what's doing this. This is why your mind is all messed up, And so she took away his game or whatever. And so he comes home from school. He went and he looked for it the next day. He couldn't find his video game system. He looked everywhere, couldn't find any of the games. His mom was very good at hiding things. And he thought, oh, maybe she gave it to my aunt. And it's, so that's what she would do. She would hide stuff and he never could find it. So he figured she was leaving it somewhere. So he goes to the restroom and he hears like this movement in the living room. He comes out of the bathroom and there's his game system set up and the TV's already on. And he was like, oh my gosh. So he was tentative at first. So he sat down to start playing it, and it did that thing again where it started going through all the levels and basically playing it. He just watched it happen. So at that point, it was starting to really mess with his mind. So he told his mom, I think there's something wrong here. So his mom finally started seeing stuff, about 2 weeks after he'd already been experiencing it, she started seeing stuff too. And they talked about it at the dinner table. And he basically was like, I don't want to live here. And I'd rather go, run away than live here. And the mom said, no, we're not going to deal with that. We're going to move. So they did. And that was the end of that. He had no more ghost stories or anything like that. So that was interesting, that story he told me, and that was actually, I believe, at an after party, like I said, years ago, when we were, I think it was at your stepdad's house, Tony, and we were all hanging out. And so what ended up happening, I got to know him a little better, and we hung out some, and I asked him, a couple times, different stories or whatever, and he said he didn't really have any, like, for him personally, but he introduced me to his buddy, who had a good story. And then from him, I talked to this a female that was related to them that gave me another story, and so it just kind of went from there. And so I wrote these down years ago. And so the story that his buddy told me, and this is a good one. This is a pretty good story. And now, when he was a kid, he lived in a haunted house too, like not to the extent of what happened with Koji, but he had an encounter or whatever with something, and the house that he lived in belonged to a notorious gangster, an Yakuza, basically, is what he had said, and that this guy, when he died in that house, that he was murdered, and they didn't know that when they moved in, and this was in Tokyo, and he moved in when he was a kid. And he said that the only thing that ever really happened to him, like he would hear noises, like somebody was whispering in his ear, and he would wake up, and sometimes he would look and he would see this dude with this slick back looking hair. And he said he had really bad breath, and the guy was like breathing on him, and he would look and the guy would be gone. And he said that happened a couple times, and then his little brother got shaken out of bed one time. And then he said that, there would be weird stuff, like they would go to bed, the video game would be turned off, and then in the middle of the night, Nintendo would be turned back on. Stuff like that. And the next day they're in trouble. And they're like, which one of you did this? Blah, blah, blah. But he said it was like small stuff like that, And then he was like, there were other things. I don't even really remember. It was so small. Like stuff would be moved around, But he said that the one terrifying, scary thing that happened to him and his little sister were in the backyard. And they had a very small backyard. It wasn't very big. But he said that there was this like little Buddha statue in the back corner, like a shrine, that was there when they moved in, and it was like a fountain, but it didn't run or whatever. And he said that the water was coming out of it. And he said that they walked over to it, and they heard like a hissing noise. And they turned around, and they see this big, black, fluffy cat. And he said it was a humongous cat. He's like, it's like the size of a dog, like a mid-sized dog. He's like, you're not going to see a cat that size, whatever. And they're standing there looking at it, and his sister like tried to go toward it. And then he was like, no, get back. There's something weird about it. And the eyes were kind of yellowish glowing, And so they ran inside the house because he felt something was wrong with the cat. Like there was something evil about the cat. And so then he went to sleep that night, and when he started dreaming, he had like a nightmare. And he said that in the nightmare, there was this man hanging off the roof and was like trying to stick his arm through the window of his bedroom. And he was actually staying in his little brother's room that day because his little brother was having night terrors, so he slept in his brother's room. And when this thing was trying to reach into the glass or whatever, he said that he looked up and he saw it it was a dream, of course. And he said that it looked like this man that was always like whispering in his ear at night, And he said that the man's mouth opened real wide, like his head elongated, and his arms stretched out real long. And he thought, oh, And then he said at that point he kind of became cognizant that it was a dream. He goes, at that point I knew I was dreaming. This was a dream, not real. And he said, so I woke up, and he goes, and when I woke up, I looked and I saw like this vapor looking stuff hanging outside of my brother's window. And he said that he sat there and he watched in amazement, as in my words, but like that it became kind of like a ball, like a cloud that concentrated into a ball and then fell to the ground. And when he walked up to the window to look out of the window, there was that cat that they had seen earlier, the cat that was in the yard. And he said that was absolutely hands down the most creepiest thing that ever happened to him in that house. And he said that he ran to his mom and dad's room and freaked him out, woke him, and he got his butt whooped. He said it was not good because his dad was a business guy working all the time. He was a workaholic, and he was like, "You woke me up to tell me some fairy tale nonsense," And so he got in big trouble. So, anyways, that was his story. Yeah, and so that was the guy that used to hang out with Koji. He told me that story, and that was a crazy one because when Koji was like, "I got a story, but I mean, my friend's got one that's a lot more, it's a lot,
unique.
It's unique, yeah." And so, anyways, so Ronan, that was Ronan's story that he told us, and to distinguish him from the other Ronan, I started calling him Oni because he had a crazy Oni tattoo, like right there on his neck and his chest. If anybody knows what an Oni is, do you know what an Oni is? Tell me.
Yeah, it's like the closest thing you could say to like a demon, I think. or in what I've seen pictures of them, and they usually have horns and or different color skins, very big,
colorful.
Yeah,
they're like ogres.
Yeah,
ogre
pretty much
demons,
ogres.
Yeah. And in the Japanese folklore, the oni is actually considered a foreigner. It didn't originate from that, and a lot of the Japanese mythology says that the oni came with the Mongolians when they invaded. So that may be just to demonize them, But there are forests in Japan where it is said that the oni inhabit these areas, and that's where we're going next. This is more along the lines of a cryptid. Okay, the oni do look like ogres. Now they can be green, they can be gray, and they can even be black. They do tend to show up in Japanese art, and they have a lot of pictures of them. Back in the feudal Japan, they used them. The face masks. I think we talked about that the other day. What are they called? I don't remember. Starts with a K. Not a kabuki. That's the makeup. It's called anyway.
Saying those either way, but
anyway, yeah, we were just talking about
it. But we're talking about how that face mask is basically. I think it's based off of. It's meant to scare,
and it's an oni.
Yeah.
Sometimes the samurai would wear the face mask that was shaped
to battle because they would want to
the fearsome look. With the fangs and whatever. So. This guy was hiking with his dad when he was a little kid, and they were going on a trail. And this was a story that I got from a listener, from a listener's friend, I guess. So they were hiking on a trail, and this was outside of the city of Osaka, I believe. And he said there was a little trail or something out there, and they went on, and it wasn't like it was just heavily wooded, it was just so many, it was desolate, isolated or anything. He said there were people around, but he said that they got up to this T in the road or whatever, and they went to the right, and they started staring into the woods because they saw something crouching down, and he said they walked up onto another father with a child who he remembered being a little girl. And they were pointing and looking, and they're like, "What is that?" And now this is what he told me. And this sounds crazy, but he said that it looked just like a traditional Japanese oni, and he said it looked like a real flesh and blood creature, and that it was squatted down behind a stump. And he said that it literally looked like it was defecating. He said, and he goes, it didn't even appear to be concerned with us at all. He goes, there were us two, me and my dad. And then this other guy with his daughter, and we're all staring at this thing, whatever it was. He said it was a grayish green color. And he said that it was grimacing, like its face. And he said that it was squatted down, but he doesn't know exactly what it was doing. He said he saw a cloth over its, private, whatever, but it was it was naked other than that. But that it looked like a ogre, like a demonic looking ogre guy or something. He said the eyes, it wasn't that far away. He said maybe 30, 40 yards, he could see it behind like half of it behind a tree, and in between that and a stump. And he said that it just did not even look like it was concerned with them at all. And it was just squatted down. And he said that he didn't know what it was doing, but that it had the bottom fangs kind of came up over the lips of the top of there was an underbite. He remembers that. And he said that the eyes looked like they were completely black, and then that there were these weird circles around the eyes. And he remembers that, wrinkles, weird circles. And I was like, what could that be? And I mean, that is a traditional oni. He said that it had growing off the sides of its head that what looked like little horns, little. And he kind of described it I asked him point blank. I was like, "What do you think?" Because you know how Bowser looks on the video games, and of course Japanese people are very familiar with Nintendo. And I told him, I said, like Bowser, almost he says, yeah, kind of it had hair, He said, but it had these little horns, because the way he described it. And I said that kind of sounds like Bowser, But Bowser would be more like a Kappa. Would be and that's another.
I think that's. I don't even think it's I think they were based off Kappas.
Yeah, and that's why they call them Koopa. Koopa Trooper, whatever the Kappas. And do you want to tell the audience what a Kappa is?
Yeah, it's basically like a man turtle.
Yeah, like a demonic man turtle.
Visually to describe it is basically just like a demonic man turtle. They live in water. They're pretty. I don't think they're all bad, but I think they're pretty mischievous, and they will try to drown you.
Yes,
I think that's their thing.
They do, and that's a story that I got, and we've talked about that. The thing with the cat, I wanted to go back to that real quick with Ronan's encounter, and I know what that was. What it's called is it's called a bakanico, and that is a cat shapeshifter. That is the kind of shapeshifter that turns into a cat. Now, the thing that I wondered about was that this was a yūrei, and now like when you die in Japanese culture, you're a rikan or a reiken, which is your soul, and then it can go into a purgatory type state, awaiting judgment, whatever, and then it can return though if it's got some sort of sorrow, or if it's got some sort of revenge, or if there's some unfinished business, and it can become a yūrei. Now, there's a type of yūrei which actually becomes more like a demonic entity, like a bakanico, and it has to be like an evil, like it's like an evil person, and they can assume their spirit, their spirit can literally possess animals, and they choose to possess like cats, or they can shapeshift into cats. Now, here's the funny thing: when he fell down from the roof, Ronan didn't see him fall in. Like there might have been a cat down there that he was using to possess the body of, and maybe that when the ball, cloud, soul, whatever it fell into that cat's body, or it could have manifested as the cat because he saw it fall, then he walked up and saw the cat. So he didn't see him become the cat. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. There's a detail there that I just thought I'd throw out. Now, as far as this Oni looking creature in the woods, I would say, that if you looked at this creature or whatever on that little hike and bike trail or whatever it was, I would say it was an Oni, like an ogre Oni. He said it had another feature too. It had hair, like very hairy on its chest and its stomach, but more like a man's, not like a Bigfoot. Because I asked that question. I was like, no, we're not talking like something that could have been like a Sasquatch. He's like, absolutely not. It didn't look anything like a Sasquatch or what you would think a Sasquatch would be. Did not appear ape-like at all. It was like an ogre. That's just the way he kept describing it, like an Oni, like a traditional Oni. And it could have been an Oni manifesting itself, in that moment. Maybe it was not even aware that they could see it. I don't know. Or maybe he was, it's just a creature that lives out there like a cryptid, and he had to poop. I don't know what was going on with that.
Do you think like maybe he was in between worlds and he was like, oh man, I just got to go real quick. So he just took a quick pit stop.
Maybe him walking through the portal and then he gets to this side and he's like, oh yeah, I got to actually do physical things now. I don't know.
He's like, oh no, those two people I ate earlier really getting to me.
Yeah. And so there are some pretty colorful stories out of Japan. Like there's a lot of cool mythology. I encourage anyone to go and wants to learn about these things and read about it.
It's its own little world. I mean, I think one of my favorites is like a snow fox, which is some that if you get lost in the wintry just blizzard, you might find just a beautiful lady just standing there, who I think there's a couple different ones. I think there's one that's like evil. And there's one that what it does is like she'll lead you away, and she looks so pretty that you'll just follow her, and she'll just lead you into your death, into the blizzard. I think there's other ones where like she'll just let you see her, and you'll keep chasing after her, but you'll never find her again. And I think there's other ones where they'll lead you to their home. They actually eat you.
Oh,
so like there's different kind of ones, But I really like those because I think the ones where I think it's a really funny idea to just be lost in a blizzard and then you see someone that's just so beautiful that you just have to chase after them, that you lose your reason. And I'm like, I find it hilarious, I think.
Yeah, and then, well, I mean,
I think it's just
if you're lost in a blizzard, though, and you see anybody, you might just go from the hopes of just trying to live.
Yeah, but what really struck me, or what I really stuck by, was that it's not even just like, oh, I hope they can help me live. It's more like that they're so beautiful, I just have to follow them. So that just like being able to just override all of that it scares me, being able to override your very instinct to survive. Yeah, in such a dangerous situation that the only thing you can think of is this creature in front of you, and then follow it into your own death.
Well, what happens if it's a beautiful woman and it only appears to horny guys, or what? How does that work?
I mean, yeah, I think fox spirits are mostly females. I don't really know. I mean, there might be, but I mean, I've the stories I've read, they seem to be beautiful females that lead, men, kind of like sirens, or mermaids, or anything creature that uses its beauty to hypnotize people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I know that there is a story that I glanced over it one day, and when I was doing research, and I think it was a story. It was called Akirio or something like that, and it's called Genji's Tale or something. And Akirio was, she was like so in love with this guy that she became enraged, and she possessed his wife or something, and then caused the wife to die, and the wife was pregnant. And so then she became so stricken with grief that she turned herself into a nun, a Buddhist nun, or whatever they do, the female version of monk or whatever. And then after she died, then she began to haunt Genji again and the story is that her daughter had to do the funeral rites, because the Japanese believe that if you don't do the funeral rites correctly, and if anything happens at all, that spirit will be returned. It will be bound. They're very they're very spiritually in tune with that, So it's like
they take that very
seriously, yeah. And it's funny because even as technologically advanced as they are, and as grounded as they are in their modernism and technology, it's so different from the West, because spiritualism is like dying in the West. I mean, but in Japan, it's still very much a part of the culture. It's very strong. I was recently reading about the Kali Yuga. Now, this has nothing to do with the Buddhism or Japanese, whatever. It's a Hindu belief, but they believe that in the Kali Yuga, which is what we're in now, which is this long period of time, it's like 432,000 years, something like that, that spiritualism, within the first 10,000 years of the Kali Yuga, it's still there. But after that, it just dies off, and man becomes nothing but just materialistic, 100%. There's no spirit. There's just, this base instinct, and becomes more and more debased, and there is no spirituality. And it's really sad because, you can kind of see it happening before our eyes.
Yeah.
I think that in the East, with the exception of China, of course, but I mean, you're going to see it probably be one of the last bastions of spirituality, because, like I said, with the exception of communist countries that completely kill the spirit, and it would make sense that communism would be, a part of the destruction, because it completely throws out the spirit of anything. You don't have any spirituality at all.
Yeah, I think like that's one of their tenets or something like that, was like to kill all animals that didn't have any use.
Yeah.
Which is a ridiculous thing to me. Mm-hmm. Or like any use to mankind.
Any use to mankind, yeah.
Which is ridiculous.
And they've even made it illegal to reincarnate.
Yeah, I read that. I showed my mom that.
We're talking about China, folks. We're not talking about Japan.
Yeah, I showed my mom that. She was just very disappointed. And she shook her head and she didn't talk. She didn't say anything about it.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of... there's no love lost between those two countries either, Vietnam and China. So, yeah. So anyways, moving on here, this story right here I got from someone who actually lived in Hawaii, but their parents are of Japanese descent. So I wanted to give you this one here. This one was pretty crazy. I thought about doing one just for Hawaii because I had these weird stories. I got one about the night marchers, which is crazy, but I'm waiting to see if I get any more. I'm going to put something out there, and just like I did with the chupacabra, and see who throws me some stuff. Because if anybody has any night marcher stories, I'm looking for those. So anyways, this one happened in it was Japanese parents, of course, and this was a kid. His dad served in World War II. It's weird, okay? It's a weird story. His dad built a koi pond in their backyard on the big island of Hawaii. And him and his sister would go back there and play, and the dad was very adamant about them not playing near the koi pond, to the point where he put a little fence around it and locked it, put a lock on it. But the fence wasn't high enough, and the kids would just jump the fence, and they would go and get in the koi pond or whatever. And the koi pond was actually built by their grandparents, I believe, and the dad just maintained it, and he put up a fence around it. So the story that I was told was that as children, they would go and they would play in the backyard or whatever. Sometimes they would hear something splashing and making giggling noises by the pond, and they would go and they would look. They would catch a glimpse of something black, like going into the water. And that went on, for a couple weeks or a couple of months, whatever. They kept hearing this noise, and it just started when their dad had did the koi pond, like he did some renovations, I guess, and had set it up. Let's put it that way. And the kids were, like the water he restocked it and redid it. It wasn't him that originally built it, but he refurbished it. And so the kids would go and they would hear this noise and playing and whatever. And so there was an incident one time where the male child, don't have a name for him, I'm not going to say his name, but he actually jumped the fence and decided to go, and the koi pond looked very inviting. And so he goes and he starts dangling his feet into the koi pond, and he liked the way the fish would come up and touch his feet, whatever. And it was relaxing. And he looks across the koi pond and he sees this black, just weird looking creature. He couldn't make out what it was at that time. And he said it began to kind of swim toward him, and it looked almost like if a turtle had like a human appendages and was swimming toward him. And so he got scared, so he jumped out and he jumped the fence and he ran, back into the house. And he decided he wasn't going to go play out there anymore. And then one day he heard something literally going like psst, psst, like that, like trying to get his attention. So he goes up to the fence and he looks through the fence and he sees this creature, and it was making noise. But he didn't, at that moment, he realized, it wasn't even, looking at him. It had nothing to do with him. It was like it was trying to get something's attention, but he couldn't tell what it was. And so he was like, what is that? Now, he said it almost looked like a goblin built like a turtle, okay? That's the way he described it. It was a goblin turtle creature that was covered in black slime or moss.
I mean, it's a pretty good description, I think. They have a beak.
Yeah, he said it had a weird looking nose.
Yeah, they have a weird beak. Mm-hmm. And then I think they have a shell in the back.
And he said it was like almost like a round hump, but it looked kind of like a shell, but you couldn't make out it wasn't clearly defined. Like you're going to see a turtle and look, the little squares. Or whatever. Yeah. And so he said that he gave me a pretty good description. And he said that when it turned and saw him, he had like little claws, and he said at first it was like a doll, like he thought, not a doll. He said a stuffed animal that had been rolled around in motor oil. That's what he said it looked like, and he thought, "What is this?" So
it was like super slimy, just greasy, and
it was very slimy. Gross. And it jumped into the water, and he said that he knew it was, and it wasn't really huge, it wasn't real big. He said it was like the size of a small man, and he said that, but this koi pond was huge, and so he couldn't resist. He jumped over the fence and he went to go look to see what it was. And he said he stood back a ways, but he said he couldn't see, for some reason, he couldn't see the whole koi pond and the area right there and directly in front of him. He knew that if there was something in there, it had to be right there. And he said that he just couldn't help himself. So he took a couple steps and he didn't get super close to it, about 1.5 feet away, 2 feet, whatever. And he said that he looked over the side and this thing leapt up out of the water and grabbed him by his arms. And he said he wasn't but 7 years old. So he's a skinny little boy, and it just started yanking him into the water. And he said that he fell forward into the water, but his feet caught on the rocks that were positioned on the outside. Like his foot got caught. One of his feet in particular got caught on the rocks, almost like he just got lucky. And this thing was pulling on him, and he said that he opened his eyes and he looked right at it, and it had red eyes, like reptilian-looking red eyes. And he said that it had little claws, and they were dug into his head, and that he was struggling to get out and get away from it. And he said that he went instinctively just went and he stuck his thumbs into the eyes where the eyes were. And he said that it burned his thumbs. It was like hot. It was weird. And he said this weird, like smoky looking stuff squirted out the tops of his eyelids, or, his eyeballs, like the top of it. And you could see it like it was like, but it wasn't like blood. And he said that it was like just immediately he let go. And then there was like this circular thing in the middle. I forgot what he called it, like in the middle of the pond. And he pushed himself up. And he said that it was almost weird. He felt like an energy or something like kind of grab his back and like lift him up out of that water. And he, at that moment, he felt like, later on when he thought about it, he said he felt like it was his grandfather. And he said that when that happened, this thing just looked up at him and watched him going up, and it didn't jump back out and try to grab him or anything. And so from that moment, for the rest of his life, he never messed with that koi pond. He never went around it. He didn't go and, take a look at it. He would hear splashing sometimes. And so he said for years and years, he never told his parents about it, because it was one of those things where, you go and you tell your parents and then they're like, what's wrong with you? You're crazy, whatever. And so he said that he just like for years and years, he never talked about it, never mentioned it. He didn't say anything. Just said that he was almost drowned in a koi pond. And, that was it. And then, like one day, him and his sister were talking, and he told her what had happened to him. And she was like, oh my gosh. She's like, nearly the same thing happened to me. She's like, I was sitting on the edge of the koi pond, because neither one of them would go over there, but neither one of them had ever really talked about what had happened. He said that when he first started to ask her if anything weird had ever happened, she would say, no, no, no. But he said that she was dangling her, she told him finally one day when they were adults, she was dangling her feet over the side, and she felt something rub against her feet, and she looked down, and there was this like kind of slimy looking goo on her foot. And she was like, ugh, what is that? And then right then this thing popped up and tried to pull her feet first into the water. And whenever she started kicking at it, it cut the bottom of her foot, and she looked, and it had really big teeth. Now, when I asked him about the teeth, he said, yeah, I remember fangs, like, on both sides of his teeth, and it looked demonic, But she said that it had teeth. It was like a beak-looking nose, like if you took a human's nose and turned it into a beak, it was almost like it was fleshy, but it was like an actual beak. And then she said that the teeth, there were big teeth on either side of it. And she said that you could see kind of a grayish skin tone underneath the black slime. So that was crazy. And she got loose. She fell backwards. She kicked at it and fell backwards, and she ran and got out of there. And so when their dad died, they actually got inherited like a necklace from the dad. And apparently it was something, he was a sailor. He was on a ship during World War II. And apparently, that there was this, and it was just this whole, I don't know how to describe, like he said that, his dad, his mom and dad had him when they were older. They had two older siblings that his dad had from a previous marriage. Okay. And so then when his dad was older, then he had them, So in his dad, he said his dad was like 42 or something like that when he was born. So his dad died. He was still not they're very old. He was like, whatever. And so he said that, when he was at the funeral, one of his older brothers came to him and handed him this necklace, and it had like a little amulet, and there were 3 holes in each one. And one of them had like a little, like a yin yang type thing. And another one had like a little, whatever. It was like some sort of like a Buddhist symbolisms, And so he's like, where's the third piece at? He goes, I don't know. There's no other third piece, but this is something that, he had given me when I was young, when he came back from the war. And so the older brother, who had always been kind of a fatherly figure to him, gave it to him. And so a couple years after that, the mother was going to sell the house, and they drained the koi pond. And he saw something shiny underneath that big cement thing in the middle of the koi pond. And he goes to pick it up, and he turns it over, and there is literally the picture of that creature, like its face, but like drawn on this like metal, on this piece of silver. And it was in the koi pond. And it was Dad was always real adamant about never going into that koi pond. When he talked to his mother about it, and he showed her this metal coin, for lack of a better term, he's like, "What is this?" And she was like, "Your dad claimed that there was this creature that was a familiar with the family, and that there was this what they say in Japanese, like a witch, is called a majo or a majo, whatever, a majo. That she had gone to his mother, this guy's dad had gone before he went to the war. He went to his mom, and she took him to a majo or majo, however you want to say it, and then that majo witch gave him that amulet and said that it would be there to protect him. Now, his ship did get hit when they were fighting in the Pacific. They were fighting against, I think it was the British at that time, and his ship got hit. And when he was in the water, he was starting to sink. He was unconscious, whatever. He felt something like claws, some sort of type of claws or something. He could feel it on his back. And he said that he woke up and he was being pushed to the surface. And as he looked down, he saw this weird looking creature swimming away. And he managed to grab onto a piece of debris. And 2 days later, he was rescued. And so, he attributed it to this creature, whatever, that was given to him by this majo, whatever. Now, here's another thing. There's a creature that's called a tsukemono. Now, tsukemono is also kind of a broad term, but it is what they call possessing thing. It is something that will possess you. Okay. Now, according to what was told to him when he came back from overseas, his mother was very adamant about him going back to this witch and returning the amulet, the necklace, whatever. And she said, "No, you can't do that." It was just the single coin or whatever. So he took it to the Buddhist temple, and he asked them about it because she wouldn't take it back. And they told him that he needed to have these other symbols to put it around that symbol or whatever, to keep it kind of like encapsulated, I guess. And so there were 3 different symbols. One was not on the necklace, and they don't know what it was. And then there was the one in the middle that was missing, and they think that that's where that one belonged, the coin, that little coin or whatever. And the other symbols were there to kind of keep it at bay, I guess. And so he took that middle coin and he threw it upside down. He laid it upside down in the koi pond where it was supposed to be trapped so that it couldn't go out. And that's what he was told to do. Okay. And so it couldn't go out and harm him or try to possess him. And the only way that you would have any sort of problems with it is if you went up to the koi pond without the proper protection, and the children obviously didn't. They didn't know anything about it. He just warned them, do never go near the koi pond, stay away from the koi pond, blah, 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 blah. And the only way that it would cause any problems is if you went up to the koi pond at certain times of the day, supposedly, too, is when it was active. And that's something that's a common theme in Japanese folklore. The yūrei are said to be most active between 2 and 3 in the morning. That's weird because we that's when we get a lot of paranormal activity.
Yeah.
And so the yūrei are the type of ghosts that come back, for different reasons. But this creature, I believe, was something that stayed in that koi pond as long as he didn't go and mess with it, and he had the proper protection when he went to go and put the fish and deal with all that, and it wouldn't hurt the fish, supposedly.
Well, yeah. It's really scary. Because I was sitting here and I was trying to think, and I was, this is my first time hearing this story, so I was trying to come up with theories. And the first theory I came up with is when you said that the grandpa made the koi pond, I thought that the grandpa was familiar with it and created the koi pond for it. Because remember when I mentioned earlier that most of them are pretty malicious, but not all of them?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. I thought okay, he built the koi pond as a home for this thing. And and because like you said, they don't harm, fish. They live pretty peacefully. So if you just gave it a home, I thought okay, maybe it stays there and it looks over the land, or it looks over the fish, or it looks over that pond. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But then as I kept thinking about it, I was like, well, maybe it's not the father or maybe it's not the grandpa, but maybe it's the father because he was so adamant
about not going in there.
Yeah.
And when I first heard the story, I thought, as I was reading through the first time, I was thinking, this dad it's probably because the grandfather, and the dad knew that there was something there, and I kept thinking that. But then when I read about the coin, the picture of that thing or whatever, to me, the moral of the story is just don't go to a witch. I mean, like,
because I read a story where they found one of these things, which was just drowning massive amount of people. So they actually they asked a witch to build a pond to trap it. So, because they didn't know how to actually get rid of it from their river entirely. So what they did was they just gave it a different home. And so, I mean, because I know that, in the Western world that witches were pretty bad, but I think in the Eastern, like, it's a little different. I think, like, some witches aren't, like, inherently...
Well, that's here, too. I mean, there's witches that aren't... But, I mean, to go to a witch to have a familiar attached to you, I mean, come on, dude.
Well, yeah, well, the thing about these creatures is I don't think they're evil. It's like it's different.
No. I mean, they're kind of neutral, but they do kill people.
Yeah. So
they are blood drinkers too. They're like water vampires.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. So I mean, it's different than like contracting a demon as a familiar, because then that thing is not good. Not like there's no good ending that comes from that. But a Kappa, you might get lucky and just have one that if you ask it for a small task. Or if you ask it for something and it just wants to, like, something simple, then it might just be as simple as that.
Yeah.
They're very just like, I think that's what's really cool about Japan is like, even though yokai is like it's supposed to be all encompassing of all their creatures, it doesn't mean that everything in that subgenre is evil. Mm-hmm. Nothing in that is like definitely good or definitely bad.
Well, that's like the jinn in the Middle East.
They're definitely like the jinn.
Yeah, the jinn are very the same. The fairies I believe they're all the same thing. They're all from the same family. They just live in different regions. Mm-hmm. I think
because of the long periods that they like lived in those regions, that it might have just changed how they are.
Yeah,
and I think that's why they're different from each other, even though they share a lot of similarities.
They share a similar origin. Yeah, because you get the same thing. You get good, bad, and in between, everything in between, from the fairies and from the jinn. And from the yokai.
I mean, yeah. I mean, there's, the ones you stay away from, the ones that, if you get lucky, you can interact with, and the ones that just will leave you alone as long as you don't go cross his bottom line or whatever.
Yep.
But, yeah, I mean, I've always held Japan in a close place in my heart because growing up, I mean, I didn't really have a lot, so a lot of Japan's like cultures and stuff that they had was really interesting to me, and it kept me busy as a kid.
But you studied that, and you studied Korean too.
And Korean, and everything.
And of course, you know a lot about Chinese because the Vietnamese
I'm half Chinese,
adopted, a lot of the Chinese culture. Yeah. So moving on from that, that's what happened with that, and so the koi pond, I guess, was where that creature was, and I don't know what happened when they took the coin out, whatever. He said that when he found the coin, they took it off and turned it upside down. That because they were moving whatever, and that he took it back to the witch, who told him that he had to build another koi pond to entrap that thing. And I asked him if he did, and he said no. And I said, so what happened to the coin? He said he threw it in the ocean.
So I think he just probably released it then.
Yeah, it's probably just released into the water, I guess. I don't know. He said nothing's happened to him since then. So that's that. I don't know what happened to it after that, because who knows what happened to it. But so, folks, that's going to do it for tonight. Here at PRT, we all appreciate you tuning in and listening. Before I go, I want to do a shout out to a young man named Jameson Hunter. His dad reached out to me. He's from Lewisburg, West Virginia, and they're listeners of the show. His dad's name is Joel, and Jameson, I wanted to give you a shout out. I really touched my heart. Your dad said that you're into writing and you're really into Bigfoot and Dogman, and we definitely got some Bigfoot and Dogman stuff on deck coming up pretty soon. Just keep on listening to the show, and we'll keep sending you interesting topics. and maybe we'll give you some inspiration for some things to write about. And I know there's a lot of really good authors in the cryptid world, like Nick Redfern and Ken Gerhard, Lyle Blackburn, David Weatherly. Those are all friends of mine, and I maybe you could be the next the next big author. And any of you people out there, aspiring authors, people that want to write. I'm not a writer myself personally. I'm still struggling to try to figure out how to write a book. But if you are a writer, one of my nephews is really good at writing. I encourage you to keep doing it and just to keep reading books. Check out all these guys' books and check out how they write. And just keep going after it and pursue that, because that is an honorable profession and it's a great career. It's something that you could pursue and do something with. And I hear that you won a contest at school. It was called the History of Cryptids. That's amazing. That's awesome. And I'm glad that you are pursuing that. And I'm glad that you're a listener of our show. And I hope you continue to be a listener. And all of you people out there in the cryptid and spirit world, guys that are into the paranormal, UFOs, Bigfoot, Dogman, aliens, whatever it is you're into, ghosts, we do it all here. We cover it all at PRT. Next week, we're going to finish up part 2 with this strange Japanese demons, and it's going to be a really good show, so I hope you all tune in. Once again, I want to remind you guys to go back and listen to the part 2s, because sometimes the part 1 just kind of lays the groundwork, and then part 2 really lays it home. And so really brings it home. And so I would like for you guys to go back and check out some of the part 2s to some of these shows, because I see that there's a lot more views on the part 1s than there are on part 2s. And maybe the part 1 didn't have enough meat on the bone or whatever. And so you guys kind of checked out. But part 2 definitely is going to be good, just like this one. And I hope that you guys tune in and you listen. And Jameson, I want you to keep on pursuing that writing. Keep doing it, man. And for everyone at the PRT team, from me and Tony, good night.